Star Wars, New Legends. Episode 13, The Sovereign Supremacy. The Jedi Knight, Sid Solo, has been sent by his mother, New Republic Intelligence Minister Leia Organa, into the Devular Neutral Zone to investigate the Force Link technology being distributed by the Syndicate to militant factions throughout sovereign space. While pursuing a lead inside a cartel-owned nightclub on the planet Nexoria, Sid's cover was exposed, and violence erupted. With the aid of New Republic agent Phi Lin, he escaped with the location of a secret facility hidden on one of the planet's remote coastlines. Now, Sid Solo, Phi Lin, and their smuggler pilot, Kai Calrissian, are aboard the Outer Stellar, heading towards an abandoned Imperial core plant at a place called the Yardell Docks. Their mission? Destroy a concealed shipment of Force links, but not before recovering a few samples of the mysterious technology for the New Republic to study. Volume 2. Phantoms of the Empire. The Outer Stellar maintained an altitude just low enough to evade detection by Nexoria's planetary defense forces, the primary authorities responsible for policing ships entering and leaving the planet's orbit. Although the maneuver protected them from inspection during the heightened alert, it also made the journey to the Yardell Docks a fair bit longer than it should have been. Cartel violence was a common occurrence on Nexoria and throughout the Devular system. But such conflicts had to be sanctioned by the Elwyn houses, and were handled like nothing more than mere business negotiations. The Elwyn overlords regarded conflict as a natural and even healthy force, one that weeded out weakness and strengthened society. Their culture viewed war as something unavoidable that therefore had to be carefully managed. They approached war much like a nature warden would approach the inevitability of a forest fire, by getting ahead of it and conducting periodic prescribed burns to clear away any dead wood and brush that, if left unattended, could ignite a far greater, uncontrollable blaze. Thus, in the same way a warden purified a forest with controlled burns, the Elwyns believed they purified the Devular system with controlled wars. In fact, for many millennia, sensational conspiracy theories had circulated throughout numerous regions of space, alleging that the Elwyns secretly maintained a controlling hand in nearly every major war in galactic history. This was largely because the Elwyn banks were the oldest in the galaxy, making them some of its most prominent interstellar institutions. It was a status that frequently placed them in the position of lending money to both sides of a conflict. But within Devular space, the Elwyns openly promoted their domestic policy of what they viewed as hygienic warfare. Under their approval and supervision, the legitimate and criminal organizations they controlled were periodically permitted to wage war against one another. The Elwyns believed these conflicts strengthened the organizations beneath them while preventing any one faction from becoming either too weak or too powerful for its own good. To them, the entire affair was treated more like a ritualistic sport than a blight. The Elwyns meticulously controlled and micromanaged nearly every major event within the Devular system, guiding each toward whatever outcome most benefited their hierarchy. That was why unsanctioned attacks, especially those that eliminated such a major figure, were treated with the utmost seriousness. The crew of the Interstellar had hoped to arrive while it was still dark, giving them enough time and cover to stake out the location and prepare for their infiltration ahead of the planned Quasar Syndicate meeting. But due to the killing of Zargul, the regional patrols were far more aggressive than they had expected them to be, and as a result, they reached their destination shortly after sunrise. Making their arrival still ahead of the meeting time, but not by much. However, by the time the Outer Stellar came within what should have been visual range of Yardell, the crew found themselves entering the edge of a violent storm. Treacherous winds raged with such force that they seemed to lift the ocean itself, while wild lightning illuminated the heavy dark gloom in sporadic bursts, and monstrous thunder rolled in earth-shaking waves. Perhaps the storm's most alarming feature was its blinding intensity. Visibility had not fallen to a few miles, but to a matter of meters. Despite the danger, the roiling, dark emerald and violet-tinted clouds offered one distinct advantage. Their dense curtain of torrential rain concealed the outer stellar from any potential observers in the surrounding area. The already electronically elusive ship could therefore perform its drop-off far closer to the docks than originally anticipated, an invaluable advantage when every passing moment mattered. As for the Yardell docks themselves, they had once been a bustling fishing and mining port colony that, despite its remote coordinates, had rapidly grown into an expansive settlement. It had all been part of an imperial initiative to modernize and greatly expand Republic-era outposts, ones originally built to offset resource shortages during the heavy attrition of the Clone Wars and transform them into sprawling industrial settlements. These settlements not only provided much-needed jobs to imperial citizens, but also boosted the imperial trade economy through hyper-generous austerity measures that funded the large-scale harvesting efforts of these remote colonial hubs. The scheme also offered the Empire the added benefit of relocating impoverished and lower-class citizens from the imperial core worlds to these distant industrial settlements. In doing so, the Empire not only lowered unemployment and poverty domestically, but also populated the outer core planets with colonists whose livelihoods and access to upward mobility depended entirely upon imperial industry and investment. This arrangement worked, though some would argue artificially, to strengthen public support for the Empire by completely reshaping the political character of many occupied regions through demographic manipulation. However, during the Galactic Revolution, the rural oasis suffered a catastrophic explosion at its massive planetary core power plant, a facility responsible for supplying crucial energy to the expanding settlement, as well as exporting exotons of superfluous energy throughout the galaxy. While the rebellion claimed the explosion was caused by Imperial incompetence, the Empire maintained that rebel saboteurs had destroyed a sub-reactor at the plant in what it described as an act of eco-terrorism. The initial explosion led to a breach in one of the facility's energy processing chambers, releasing devastating levels of refined radiation into the atmosphere and contaminating the regional ecosystem indefinitely. The detonation also triggered a chain reaction that caused an energy diffusion tank to ignite, unleashing an ionized photonic shock wave across the secluded Commonwealth. Millions of people were killed, either through instant vaporization or, over tremendously short periods of time, through terminal illness. The destroyed district had since become an isolated ghost town, strewn with abandoned buildings that stood like hollowed-out husks. Picked apart by scavengers, they now remained as relics of a forgotten civilization that ended almost as soon as it began.
Looks like those janky jammers I fixed up are working perfectly,
Kai hollered toward the back of the ship.
We haven't been pinged once. Either that, or your lead is a bust.
He fatefully grinned. Solo and Lin emerged from different parts of the ship to peer out of the cockpit windows. For a moment, Solo was taken aback by Lin's new appearance. During the entire ride, she had been catching up on sleep in the crew cabin. But now, here she was, wearing one of Han Solo's old outfits. It had been forever since he had seen the outfit being used as actual clothes. The outfit itself was the only thing Sid Solo still owned of his father's, ever since he had left the New Republic so many years ago. In fact, Sid didn't even know why he had held on to the outfit for so long and kept bringing it with him on his travels. He told himself it was for luck, due to his father being such a legendary pilot who had survived multiple impossible-to-survive skirmishes. After all, it was a Jedi belief that people could sentimentally enchant long-term dwellings or personal items with their residual essence, turning those places or items into minor force artifacts that possessed a subtle energy capable of ever so slightly amplifying the attributes or traits that individual was strong in. But over the years, the clothes just became that, a lucky charm preserved through habit. Sid barely even associated the clothes with a person whenever he looked at them. That was until now, seeing them adorned on a roguishly beautiful woman who was giving them a new life. Catching his peculiar stare, Lynn glanced back at him and shrugged with guarded indifference.
Hey, don't blame me for your father's poor taste in fashion.
She said, defensively. Solo said nothing. Realizing how easily his surprise could be misinterpreted, he brushed it aside with a modest smile, and the two continued into the cockpit.
Well, that's nice. I can't see a thing.
Lynn said as she approached the cockpit window, peering through the heavy torrential rain and trying to discern what lay beyond it.
Honey, ain't nobody said anything about taking the scenic route.
Kai quipped, his attention fixed on the navigation displays.
Besides, I have to rely on these old holo maps to guide us and shortwave mag pings to keep us from crashing into anything. I mean, with the kind of advanced scanners and detectors those two groups are probably equipped with, using any type of radar or galactic positioning arrays would be like painting a bright flashing target on our bantha hides.
They are there. I can sense them.
Sid assured them both with quiet concern.
But something is off.
What? They ain't serving booze at this party?
Kai lampooned, keeping his eyes trained on the displays and sensors. Lynn gave him an annoyed look before turning her attention to Solo.
What is it, Solo? Those Jedi senses tingling?
She asked with crude earnestness.
I don't know.
He replied thoughtfully. His eyes remained fixed on the haze before them, almost as though his sight had detached from his body and was scouring the world outside for answers.
It's something I've never sensed before. It could be the large concentration of force links.
His expression darkened slightly.
Maybe things are further along than we thought, and the Syndicate has already shipped in that strange Ep.Xiii substance that powers them.
He remained suspended in that strange trance, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the cockpit window. The whine of the ship's electronic components and digital displays filled the ensuing silence of the passengers, while the ambience within the cockpit mingled with the roar of the engines and the winds outside, creating an air of disquieting tension that settled over everyone. But then, Sid suddenly broke his gaze and turned his attention to Kai.
How close can you get us?
He asked, in an urgent yet stern tone.
In this weather, hell, pretty damn close. But hey, man, I'm starting to pick up a lot of jumbled activity through the signal detector, and call it a hunch, but I don't think this is the kind of party you can walk into uninvited.
Kai glanced between the cockpit window and his display.
Looks like you might have to use the service entrance if you catch my drift.
He meticulously studied the screen, using it to guide the ship through the obstructed view. To avoid detection, they were flying at a dangerously low altitude, forcing him to pay careful attention to the old maps he had uploaded and hope they were accurate enough to keep them from colliding with any obstacles hidden throughout the mountainous seaside city.
When I was looking at the nav maps earlier, I noticed there was an old drainage tube just above sea level, the big kind that jettisons reactor water, or used to anyways.
Kai went on to say, as he adjusted their course slightly.
Since the whole plant was involuntarily decommissioned a long time ago, it should be safe to traverse just as long as you don't eat any of the local plants or animals. The radiation from the site should be safe enough to breathe by now,
He said in a grim jest.
From there, you can access a conduit corridor that should take you straight into the main compound.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sid nodded approvingly, as he took one last glance at the map he had been studying during the journey to memorize the layout.
Okay, everyone, here's the plan.
he announced in an authoritative tone.
We only need at least one force-link device, and if it's there, a few samples of the Ep.Xiii shipments, so the New Republic scientists can study them.
Sid then turned his head toward Lin.
And Lin, I'll give you a small holo camera, so you can grab any evidence we can use to show that the Quasars are working with the Syndicate.
You got it, Sydney.
Lin quickly replied, but then she just as quickly paused, suddenly realizing her slip-up as everyone on the ship turned to look at her in surprise. This was the first time she had called him by his first name. She never called people by their first names. It was an ingrained trait that over a decade of military service had instilled in her. Perhaps it was the more relaxed way he talked when he was with Kai, as a lot of that proper Jedi etiquette and stiffness seemed to disappear from him. She blushed slightly at being caught. Trying to dismiss her lapse in professionalism, she simply stated,
I said, I got it.
Everyone returned to their duties, shaking off their initial surprise.
Okay, Kai, I marked a rendezvous point on your map.
Sid turned to Lin.
There are 2 satchels of charges in the back, one for each of us. The pockets are equipped with empty vials and other supplies as well. Once we've secured the samples and gathered the evidence, we'll destroy the remaining shipments with high-grade beradium explosives. Hopefully, all the proof we bring back showing that the Syndicate is working to destabilize the neutral zone will be enough to get even the New Republic Senate on our side.
His voice carried a concentrated determination.
Sydney, these schematics are older than my grandma, man. We can't even be sure that the rendezvous point is still there. The compound was kind of blown up, you know.
Kai remarked, questioning the soundness of the plan.
Well, it's the best chance we've got. Fortune favors the brave, old friend.
Solo said, with a subtle excitement tinging his voice.
Cut the old friend crap, will you? We're both younger than the New Republic, and with the way this plan could go, there's no guarantee we'll live long enough to become old friends.
Kai responded, a hint of genuine panic creeping into his cadence.
Well, we will just have to trust in the Force on this one.
Sid exclaimed as he patted Kai on the shoulder.
If there are indeed Syndicate soldiers down there, then they are probably equipped with the best Force links in the galaxy, but they lack the training to wield them properly, so we've got that going for us.
A look of concern came over Lin's face. Solo was right. They weren't going up against 2-bit gangsters or even highly trained mercenaries. These would be top-tier Syndicate soldiers armed with Force powers. Still, she took solace in the fact that Sid was a highly skilled Jedi Knight, trained from childhood by the legendary Luke Skywalker. Not to mention that he was the grandson of Darth Vader himself. If they had only a 1% chance of succeeding, then Sid was that 1%. She studied his face. His expression was determined and focused. The seasoned Jedi she knew was steadily returning as they drew closer to the mission.
All right, Sydney, we're coming up on the drop-off point. Even if everything goes off without a hitch, we're still going to have a problem getting off-world.
Kai glanced at his instruments.
Luckily, this place is remote enough that I'm confident the upgrades I installed last week should be enough to outrun any low-rent patrol that tries to stop us. Just do me a favor and try to disable any Quasar or Syndicate ships you come across. Please and thank you. I'm a good pilot, but I ain't no miracle worker. There's no way this little souped-up tugboat is going to outrun or outgun one of those top-of-the-line bad boys.
He gave Solo a solemn stare.
Don't worry, Kai. We've survived worse.
Sid turned to Lin.
You ready?
Lin nodded with determination, and the two of them made their way toward the cargo bay doors. A reassured smile appeared on Kai's face. Then, just as quickly, it vanished.
Worse?
Kai suddenly yelled.
We haven't been through worse than this, Sydney.
He turned to shout after them.
Sydney, this is the worst.
Kai's vocal protest followed Lin and Solo into the cargo bay as they prepared to jump from the ship. Shaking his head in nervous frustration, Kai turned his attention back to the controls and searched his instruments for a relatively clean spot to hover. somewhere reasonably safe so that the two New Republic daredevils could jump down without breaking their necks. In the cargo bay, Sid and Lynn secured their satchels. Sid also took an encrypted comm pin, linked directly to the ship's closed-frequency network.
You ready, Solo?
Lynn asked, with an almost enthralled anticipation. Sid nodded his head and handed her his cloak. Lynn looked at him in confusion.
It's Talora cloth, Lynn.
Talor cloth?
She examined it with a puzzled expression. A subtle look of amusement crossed Sid's face.
Yes, Talors are large herbivores, native to Junkara, a planet where it's almost always storming. Their thistled hides are water-resistant, but more importantly, they're resistant to lightning as well. My tunic is made from the same material, so I'll be fine.
He then gestured toward the clothes she was wearing.
But my father's outfit wasn't designed for extreme weather environments. This should help keep you dry and safe.
Aww.
Lynn cooed endearingly, a half-sincere smile appearing on her face.
If all the new Jedi are as sweet as you, then I don't know why the New Republic is always worried about such polite gentlemen turning bad.
She graciously accepted the cloak and quickly put it on as the rear cargo bay door began grinding open. As soon as the door opened, the two were met with a ferocious gust of wind, causing them both to instinctively shield their faces with their arms. The rain outside was so relentless that they could barely make out the cliff, just a few short feet beneath them. The two infiltrators knew the ship was at risk of becoming a giant target. So, instead of griping about the weather, their professional instincts took over, and they immediately leaped from the cargo bay. The powerful wind staggered them as their feet hit the rock, threatening to throw them off balance. But they each grabbed onto the other to steady themselves. The outer stellar took off as soon as they had jumped, vanishing into the haze of rain and neon darkness. The spot where they landed was on the side of a giant, jagged cliff overlooking the ocean. The overpowering gale buffeted them with such force that Lynn had to lean in and grip Solo's arm tighter, just to stay upright, as she was lighter than him.
Solo, I can't see a damn thing!
She shouted, her voice nearly torn away by the storm. A response came, not to her ears, but inside her mind.
It's okay. I can see everything.
She turned sharply, startled, and through the squints in her eyes, she met Solo's calm gaze. He then gave her a small nod. That's when the realization struck. He was speaking to her through the Force. It was an eerily surreal experience. While she had seen the Jedi in action before, she had never experienced the Force in such an intimate way. In the heat of the moment, it was strangely comforting, but its intrusive nature was still disturbingly off-putting. In the interest of the situation at hand, Lynn decided to disregard her conflicted feelings about the unsettling ability. She simply returned his nod and trusted him not to get them killed.
Below us is a penstock extending 10 feet out from the cliff face. Are you ready to jump?
He once again spoke through the Force. She nodded, and together they leaped off the cliff. From the height they leapt, the wind should have tossed them like leaves. But Sid used the Force to slow and steer their fall, guiding their descent. It was then that she realized he hadn't grabbed onto her to steady himself. He had grabbed onto her to make sure she remained safe. They dropped cleanly through the gusts, landing with floating precision atop a heavily weathered external penstock, its curved surface slick with rust and grime. Lynn blinked in shock, then noticed her white-knuckled grip on Solo's arm. She quickly let go and clutched a rock on the cliffside, trying to play it off.
Are you all right?
His voice once again echoed through her thoughts. She nodded vigorously, nervously wondering whether or not if he could read her thoughts as well. The lack of a response to this thought from Sid's mental voice was reassuring, or perhaps he was simply concealing the full extent of his abilities. Whatever the case, Lynn decided to be more careful with her thoughts. This newfound connection to the Force was making her somewhat paranoid. Solo extended his hand. She took it without hesitation, and he swung her into the penstock's inner cylinder before following her inside with a smooth, Force-assisted flip.
Okay.
Lynn caught her breath.
The acoustics are much better in here. How about we communicate like normal people from now on?
She took off his cloak and handed it back to him.
Sorry, I only did it to keep you from panicking.
Solo replied respectfully.
All right, mission accomplished. Now let's focus on the actual mission, shall we?
I couldn't agree more.
Sid nodded. Instead of lighting one of the small electronic torches they both had in their satchels, Solo ignited his lightsaber. The blade hissed to life, casting stark light and deep shadows across the pitch-black tunnel. Lynn raised a brow as she casually drew her blaster.
What happened to Jedi only using violence as a last resort?
In situations like this, the first resort is the last resort.
Solo narrowed his eyes as he stared down the haunting dark corridor.
You're a real poet, Solo. You know that?
Lynn murmured. With determined expressions, they advanced through the darkness toward one of the massive facility's many now-defunct reactor chambers. They moved forward, shadows dancing across the rusted metal as they delved further into the reaches of the forgotten base. After a relatively lengthy trek, the tunnel opened into a vast roofless chamber, one built to house an old sub-reactor that was cooled by the roaring ocean below. Sid deignited his lightsaber as the now overcast sky above evaporated much of the darkness. But what they found didn't match any schematic. The spherical, enclosed sub-reactor core looming at its center was absolutely gigantic, nearly 20 times larger than it should have been. It had also been heavily and recklessly refurbished. Jerry-rigged components clung to its attached and mismatched hexagonal ridges, scavenged pieces of technology clearly never designed to function together. Cables of various types and gauges snaked from ports along the walls to the mega-orb. Some were fused together with crude welds, while others dangled like exposed nerves. The massive reactive steel rods suspending the core plunged into a pitch-black void where the ocean's roars echoed. The rods were corroded and splitting, the metal pocked and frayed like the shell of some decaying beast.
Wow. Kai sure as hell wasn't lying when he said those schematics could be outdated.
Lynn quipped, her tone barely concealing her surprise.
This looks nothing like the brochures.
Solo didn't seem shocked by the discovery at all.
From what I've learned about the Empire, they were infamous for conducting Black Ops research and disguising the facilities as something else.
Lynn walked up to the massive converter to inspect it more closely.
Well, whether the rebels did it or not, the rumors about them blowing up this place sure as hell did a lot to damage the rebellion's reputation. The fallout from the meltdown destroyed the entire settlement and killed so many people.
She looked around the rotted crucible.
Maybe they had a good reason for doing it, if they did do it. Something they could never declassify.
It's not the past of this place that worries me.
Sid spoke forebodingly as he walked up beside her. Noticing the sudden, distant stare in his eyes, Lynn asked,
What is it?
There's a ship heading toward the base. It's a Crowbane cruiser.
Nice. I've heard about those. Exotic, precious, and pricey. Just my style.
Lynn smirked with a distant stare of her own, but her expression quickly shifted to confusion.
Wait, how do you know a ship is heading toward the base? Are you clairvoyant?
Sid turned his head toward the mouth of a tunnel across from them.
No, not really.
He spoke slowly, seemingly distracted by some pressing thought.
But recently, the Force has been sending me visions that are beyond my control.
Visions, huh?
Lynn spoke cautiously.
No offense, but how do you know they're real? What if it's just your imagination playing tricks on you? If they keep happening, maybe you should see a force doctor or something.
Lynn's comment broke Sid's concentrated gaze. He turned to her with a gentle smile.
It's hard to explain, but there's a certain clarity a Jedi feels when experiencing a sudden Force vision. It's a phenomenon that has never been fully understood, but the one thing these visions have in common is that they often precede a life-altering event.
Why do you think the Force would send you a vision of some random ship?
Lynn's tone now expressed small traces of worried concern.
It's not random. Crobane cruisers are manufactured by the Cortex Corporation. Not only are they rare, but many governments outside Syndicate space, including the New Republic, have banned their import and sale because of concerns over their data harvesting systems.
Sid explained.
So, if a Crobane cruiser has come all the way out here to the Quasar's secret compound, then it can't be a coincidence. It's definitely a Syndicate vessel. More precisely, Crobanes are also rumored to be the preferred model of ship used by the Phantoms Brigade.
Lynn was slightly taken aback by Sid's claim.
The Phantoms Brigade, huh?
She scoffed.
Those guys have one hell of a reputation, if they really exist.
Lynn looked toward the dark opening of the adjacent tunnel, her eyes fixed on the heavy black shadows that filled it.
I find it pretty hard to believe the stories I've heard about them are true, even with the Force Link technology they use.
Sid shifted his own gaze from the darkness ahead and back to Lynn. His eyes betrayed a desire to share in her skepticism, but everything he had learned about underestimating the unbelievable forbade him from doing so.
Even if their Force powers are synthetic, their will may be very real. When someone dedicates that much fanaticism and skill to a cause, they can become more dangerous than any Force wielder alive.
Lynn let out a quiet laugh as she leaned against the curving, rusted metal railing behind her.
Ah, that's right. Those guys are Darth Vader fanboys who watched one too many Galactic Civil War holo films as kids and walked away rooting for the bad guys.
She sighed, looking at Sid with amused sympathy.
I even heard they wear Vader-style combat masks. It must be strange knowing there are a bunch of militant lunatics running around worshipping your grandfather.
A faint, embarrassed flush crossed Sid's face.
When you grow up in the shadow of the Skywalker bloodline, you learn to live with the strong feelings people have about your family.
Lynn raised her eyebrows.
I guess you've got a point.
She concurred.
Growing up in a household that is so famous and infamous at the same time, people are naturally going to either love you or hate you. There's really no middle ground.
Sid gave a knowing nod before his expression calmly hardened, as though the brief respite of discussing his personal history had been shattered by some silent urgency in his mind.
Well, regardless of whether the Phantoms are here or not, that ship undoubtedly belongs to the Syndicate.
Solo turned his gaze toward the suspicious power converter.
We can't allow the Force links to get into the hands of the Quasars. If the neutral zone falls to the Syndicate, they'll control the majority of interstellar trade.
As he studied the anomalies across the massive converter, he couldn't shake the bad feelings surrounding the entire situation. Something was happening here that went far beyond the Force links. Before he could ponder it any further, Lynn snapped him from his thoughts.
You're right, Solo.
She nudged him with her elbow.
Let's get moving before those barbarians get their dirty paws on the Syndicate's new toys.
Solo nodded, and the two proceeded down the adjoining tunnel, deeper into the heart of the Quasar base. Outside, the rain had stopped as the heart of the massive storm passed. On the landing zone of the core plant facility, a platoon of armed Quasar militants had gathered around the Crobane cruiser that had just touched down. The Quasars weren't just some run-of-the-mill militia. They were one of the biggest corporate military organizations in the galaxy, and were composed of many different species. This meant that the Quasars typically wore high-quality, standardized uniforms and carried top-of-the-line equipment. But those stationed at the old core plant were not dressed in their usual attire or armed with their standard high-grade weaponry. Instead, they wore civilian clothes fitted with varying irregular pieces of armor, and carried weapons better suited to militant raiders. In fact, some might even say their appearance was more akin to that of a low-level street cartel than a professional army. The large bay door of the landed cruiser, around which the quassars had gathered, roared open and slowly descended to the ground. The groan of its hydraulics, joined by the howling wind scraping against the rusted metal frame of the base and the fading reverberations of distant thunder, created a cacophony of ominous tension. Once the bay door reached the ground, it formed a ramp from which a squad of armed soldiers emerged in formation, led by a tall, imposing hooded figure draped in a long black leather trench coat that could easily be mistaken for a robe. His face was concealed by a chrome titanium combat mask that vaguely resembled a skull. Its reflective surface was shaped with two black optical lenses, a triangular opening at the center like a nose, and thin strips of metal along the lower half that resembled elongated teeth guarding the exposed mouth area. He was the only one who showed no visible sign of being armed, and though he bore no distinguishable insignia, it was immediately clear that he was their leader due to his commanding presence alone. The troops surrounding him all donned combat masks of their own. Each was uniformly identical to one another and unmistakably reminiscent of the style once popularized by the old Imperial Sith Lord, Darth Vader. Every mask was fitted beneath a specialized helmet that complemented the battlefield-ready black tactical armor covering their bodies. There was little doubt that these soldiers belonged to the notorious Phantoms Brigade, an elite commando unit rumored to trace its origins back to the infamous 501st Legion, the very force that had once served as Vader's personal military unit. The first known mentions of the Phantoms Brigade emerged during the Cartel Wars, when rumors began spreading across the battlefields of the Sovereign systems about an elusive yet highly effective special operations force attached to the Syndicate. Many dismissed the unit as a myth, both because of the extraordinary feats attributed to it and the near-total lack of evidence that it existed beyond battlefield hearsay. The only consistent detail among the reports and rumors was the brigade's fervent posthumous devotion to the legacy of the long-dead Dark Lord himself, almost as though they regarded Vader as a god rather than a man. The Quassar soldiers watched with guarded curiosity as the Phantom commander approached the Kalish lieutenant in charge of the platoon.
So the Syndicate finally sends us some non-droid representatives.
The Quassar lieutenant sneered in a raspy, snarling voice. The Phantom commander remained firm and silent, his composure betraying no hint of intimidation. Behind him, a group of factory droids began their programmed duties, unloading large, code-locked Durasteel crates from the Crobane cruiser, each container firmly secured to a hovering cargo platform. The Quassar lieutenant glanced toward the ship's open bay and smirked at the mechanical commotion.
I was starting to think the Syndicate was nothing more than a bunch of circuit jobs, a scam organization run by droids, like the ones those New Republic imbeciles gave rights to.
His gaze shifted back toward the Phantom troops and their commander, scrutinizing them with open contempt.
I even warned our commanders that this deal was too good to be true.
The lieutenant chuckled and shook his head.
I mean, out of all the crews in the galaxy, and you entrust ours with building the new factory for your super-secret weapons facility.
He gestured broadly toward the sky as he spoke. His tone was unmistakably mocking. Despite the lieutenant's taunting, the Phantoms and their commander remained motionless, showing no sign of offense or any desire to respond. The lieutenant turned to address the soldiers under his command.
The commanders said that even if this deal is a con, the credits are real enough.
He laughed obnoxiously before turning his grandstanding posture back toward the phantoms. His body language took on a more confrontational posture.
Me? I didn't climb the ranks of the most powerful military in the quadrant by being easily fooled. But neither did my commanders.
The Quasar lieutenant eyed the cargo droids passing him on their way toward the facility's entrance. While the lieutenant was busy eyeing the droids with suspicion, the Phantom commander finally spoke.
Your concerns are of no concern to me. I was sent to ensure that the final phase of this operation proceeds as planned.
The voice booming from behind the commander's titanium mask was deep and resolute, carrying a metallic edge that demanded attention. Surprised by the response, the Quasar lieutenant turned his attention back to the Phantom commander. From behind the Kaleesh lieutenant's mask, the impression of an aggressive grimace could be seen forming in his eyes. He was clearly irritated by the casual dismissal of his authority. In the cartel world, reputation could mean the difference between life and death. Such an open display of disrespect could not go unanswered, especially in front of one's own soldiers. Though the lieutenant had been the initial aggressor, his taunts had merely been an attempt to assert his dominance on his own turf, while sizing up the stranger who was treading upon it. The security of the base was, after all, his responsibility. Communication between such dangerous organizations often resembled a deadly but ritualized dance. Although the Quasars were primarily a legitimate militant organization, much of their work involved the criminal underworld due to their many profitable yet illegal enterprises. Thus, they were known far more for brutality than diplomacy. Much of the sovereign systems operated by the law of survival of the fittest, and nowhere was that more evident than in the devular system. For any Quasar leader, such a disrespectful dismissal could not be allowed to pass without challenge. This was why the Kaleesh lieutenant now approached the commander with a renewed menace, snarling directly at the titanium-masked figure.
Seeing as how we'll soon officially be a part of the syndicate, this seems like the perfect opportunity to cut out the middleman.
He hissed as he raised his blaster beside his head, its barrel pointed toward the sky.
Maybe my crew and I should kill Cortex's lackeys and show him that we're more than qualified to handle the job ourselves.
The Quasar pressed his mask close to the Phantom commander's, sniffing him intensely, before releasing a low growl.
In my culture, a mask is sacred, something that must be earned.
The Kaleesh lieutenant's eyes bored into the commander's black optical lenses.
I earned mine through bravery and victory at the Battle of Liv Ferrin Station during the Unification Wars. Tell me, what have you done to earn yours, boy?
Suddenly, the Quasar lieutenant's eyes began to bulge. His hands flew to his throat as he choked and struggled for air, his body lifting from the ground as though seized by an invisible force. The commander stood before him in silence, his hands still at his sides as the lieutenant was elevated and slowly strangled. In a panic, the Quasar soldiers raised their weapons toward the masked Phantom commander, and the Phantom troopers raised theirs in return. The black, reflective lenses of the commander's mask stared directly into the gasping lieutenant's frenzied eyes. He finally spoke in a cold, expressionless manner.
I am the harbinger of the syndicate, the acting emissary of Don Cortex himself, sent to ensure your initiation into our organization proceeds without incident. If our generosity is not appreciated, then we will gladly amend the terms of our deal.
His metallic, synthetic voice remained utterly monotonous, betraying not the slightest hint of anger, or any emotion at all. The confused and terrified Quasar soldiers shifted the aim of their blasters between the commander and the phantom troopers, who remained resolute and still, their weapons trained directly back at them. As the Quasar lieutenant's eyes continued to bulge and his face continued to evacuate its color, the phantom commander, unfazed by the weapons aimed at him, spoke once more.
Do we have an understanding?
The lieutenant struggled to nod as he forced out a raspy response.
Yes.
At once, the invisible force released him. He dropped onto his back, clutching his throat as he took several desperate gasps for air. Looking up at the titanium-masked phantom in bewilderment, he no longer saw a stranger to be directly challenged. The lieutenant's hostile overconfidence had vanished from his eyes. Only fear remained.
Now, Lieutenant, you will allow those droids passage into the facility.
The phantom commander's tone made every syllable he spoke sound like an unnegotiable order. Still struggling to catch his breath, the lieutenant cast the commander a resentful glare before pulling himself to his feet. He turned toward the entrance of the facility, where the cargo droids and their crates waited before the unsettled soldiers guarding the way.
Let those rust buckets in.
He yelled begrudgingly while nursing his aching throat.
Your cooperation is most appreciated, Lieutenant.
The commander replied in his steely, sterile tone. The Kaleesh lieutenant maliciously eyed the commander from the side, struggling to resist the urge to start a shootout with the syndicate stooge, who had humiliated him in front of his own subordinates. But as he had said earlier, he hadn't risen through the ranks by being a fool. He knew little about the capabilities of the Force links. Though he wanted nothing more than to kill the contemptible stranger on the spot, his revenge would have to wait. His best course of action was to play along for as long as he could stomach. Perhaps once the deal was complete, he too could level the playing field by getting his hands on one of those Force links. The thought caused him to clench his fist and smile. He couldn't wait to take his revenge. Before the lieutenant's violent fantasies could cloud his judgment any further, the commander issued another non-negotiable demand.
Now, Lieutenant, take us to the command center as planned. There are important matters we must discuss with your superiors.
The Quasar lieutenant spat on the ground and indignantly raised one hand high enough for all to see. He then made a calming gesture toward his soldiers, whose weapons remained trained on the phantoms. After a moment of hesitation, they slowly lowered their guns. The phantoms did the same. With a disgruntled look in his eyes, the lieutenant motioned for the syndicate commander and his troops to follow. Together, they walked toward the massive steel entrance of the heavily guarded base. Inside the base, Solo and Lin covertly made their way through a series of interconnected conduit corridors, spanning the sprawling complex. Much of the network ran behind walls, beneath floors, and above ceilings, providing them with ideal cover for clandestine movement. Where cracked or missing panels exposed sections of the corridors, whether through scavenging or general dilapidation, they gained the incidental advantage of being able to discreetly observe the areas they passed. Occasional grated ventilation panels also allowed them to conduct minor reconnaissance. Whenever they caught a glimpse of the facility beyond, they saw rooms and areas that had been crudely refurbished and filled with specialized equipment and industrial technology that clearly had not been part of the original power plant. Stranger still, every area they had observed thus far was devoid of people. Instead, the rooms were occupied by bipedal factory droids roaming throughout the facility and performing a plethora of ambiguous duties. Although they all appeared to be the same model, neither Lin nor Sid recognized the design. Their route eventually brought them high above a wide pod bay near the ceiling. Through a large fracture in the wall, they could look down into a room that appeared to have once housed one of the complex's many spacious workstations. Old computer terminals and aged furniture had been piled into corners, replaced by recently constructed tables and platforms. Groups of civilians worked upon them, some dressed in color-coded jumpsuits and others in ordinary street clothes. These civilians were either busy assembling a vast array of fixtures and equipment or performing various other menial tasks. All the while, helmeted Quasar soldiers in civilian clothing and mismatched armor watched over them from elevated catwalks stretching across the room. Other plainclothes soldiers guarded the doors below, each holding a personal blaster rifle.
Since when did the Quasars start allowing civvies onto their bases?
Lynn whispered, while trying to make sense of what she was seeing. However, something about the sight caused Sid's expression to crease ever so slightly with pity, though he did not appear to be all that surprised by what he was seeing.
This facility is being used as a Quasar black site. It's how their organization discreetly runs its large criminal operations conducted outside its own territory.
Lynn turned to him with a puzzled expression.
Wait,
Her flummoxed look suggested she was struggling to decide which part of his statement bothered her most.
I thought the Quasars controlled this entire sector of space.
Exactly. They are responsible for the sector of devular space.
Sid replied in a matter-of-fact tone.
But that's just it. They mainly control space travel throughout the sector, along with the unincorporated planets and moons. They function somewhat like the New Republic's sectorial stellar defense forces. In that sense, they're what you might call traffic cops. They combat piracy and unauthorized smugglers. When necessary, they also enforce the Elder's decrees upon the local principalities.
His voice then became more cautious, as though his knowledge of the region's politics and what he was now witnessing had given him cause for concern.
But planets like Nexoria are too valuable for any one faction to dominate. This part of the planet is most likely controlled by a corporate trust that possesses administrative autonomy and maintains its own private militia. That would explain why the Quasar soldiers aren't wearing uniforms. They're Black Ops troops who don't want to be identified.
Lynn shook her head.
Sovereign space politics is such a headache. It really makes me appreciate the New Republic. Only two governments to worry about: the planetary government and the Republic itself. I couldn't imagine trying to keep track of hundreds of different traffic laws between the borders of a single planet.
Her speculative tone sharpened with disgust.
It's barbaric.
She scoffed.
So uncivilized.
Sid gave a sympathetic nod while continuing to peer into the room below.
It's unfortunate.
Lynn looked back at him, her face wrinkling with uneasy suspicion.
Unfortunate?
Sid nodded again, this time, more solemnly.
The Quasar seek out civilians for unskilled labor or whatever expertise they need to operate places like this. They're usually people who are down on their luck, lured into living at the operations site indefinitely with the promise of lucrative pay once the job is complete.
Lynn raised an eyebrow.
People down on their luck, getting free room and board for a few months of work in exchange for a big payday?
She asked skeptically.
What's so unfortunate about that? Sounds like a pretty sweet deal to me. Almost too good to be true.
That's because it is too good to be true.
Sid replied.
Because of the compromising nature of the work conducted at these black sites, the civilians are killed as soon as they're no longer useful.
Lynn's eyes widened at the revelation.
What? How is that even possible? I mean, how can they keep that kind of racket going? You'd think people would stop signing up once word got out that the whole thing was a dead-end scam.
Sid nodded softly.
You would think so, but it's a big galaxy. Not everyone keeps up to date with every New Republic civilian awareness advisory on the HoloNet. There's also the fact that many of the people the Quasar prey upon are economic migrants with no family or close friends, meaning they won't be missed if they disappear. And even if they are, their disappearance can be blamed on anything.
He glanced back into the room below.
You have to remember that a lot of people come to the devular system looking for work because of its status as the galactic neutral zone. Criminal organizations capitalize on all the wealth flowing through here by offering highly paid jobs within their illegal enterprises. Even Republic citizens come here in search of work.
Lynn's brow furrowed.
Why would Republic citizens come to devular? We have plenty of social safety nets for anyone who's out of work.
You're not wrong, but with the new Republic economy still in recession after the unification wars, good jobs and steady work are hard to come by. A lot of men attach their sense of worth to their wealth and work. Having the government provide for them or their families can become a source of shame. So they venture out here, hoping to earn their own way, feel self-sufficient, and avoid becoming what they see as a drain on society.
Lynn shook her head.
No offense, but guys can be so arrogantly stupid sometimes. If I were out of work, I'd take whatever assistance and honest job I could get before working for some sleazebag organization in the devular system. I wouldn't care if I had to clean toilets in the New Republic. That would still be more honorable than associating with monsters like the Quasars.
She shook her head again, repulsed by the logic of it all.
If you ask me, it's far more manly to suck it up and work your way back from the bottom than to chase some get-rich-quick scheme that could get you killed or arrested.
Sid offered a melancholic smirk.
I'm not saying I agree with it, but I do empathize with the struggle. The battle over one's self-esteem can be an ugly one. It manifests differently in all of us, but it is still something we all eventually find ourselves grappling with.
Speak for yourself.
Lynn scoffed.
I don't empathize with these guys one bit. Whenever my self-esteem runs dry, I don't start filling out applications for criminal organizations.
Sid merely raised his eyebrows and said nothing as he observed the civilians laboring at their workstations, each of them trying to build a better life. He felt it was important to study their faces, to remind himself that innocent people with hopes and dreams were inside this facility. People who had come to believe dishonest work was the only honest option they had left. Lynn, despite sincerely lacking sympathy for the men's choices, still couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort as she looked at them again. She hated how Sid made her see the humanity behind people she dismissed as either her enemies or criminals. After all, faceless enemies, as well as black and white morality, had been essential during her time as both a soldier and an agent. But now, her expression subtly twinged as she considered the grim fate awaiting them at the end of their contracts. Given the Quasars' ruthless reputation, she shouldn't have been surprised that they were capable of something as despicable as preying upon the vulnerable for profit. Yet the cold and ruthless practicality of it all, in the name of nothing more than money, disturbed her deeply. She looked back at Sid.
I suppose it makes our job easier, then.
Sid turned to her, a hint of curiosity in his eyes.
Easier?
Lynn nodded solemnly.
We have to destroy the Force links. And who knows what that Ep.Xiii stuff is made up of. If it can give you Force abilities, then it has to be some high-grade prac. The explosion was already going to cause some collateral casualties, but the Ep.Xiii, if it's here, might make the fireworks bigger.
She clicked her tongue while considering the potential dangers and shook her head.
I mean, there's no way to warn these people without blowing our cover. So knowing they're already marked for death makes accepting the consequences a little easier.
Her voice lowered, revealing the conflicted pragmatism behind her words. Sid studied her carefully, sensing the deeper struggle beneath them. He understood all too well the need for such rationalizations. They were the kind of justifications one learned to forge through the repeated use of necessary violence.
I'm afraid you're probably right.
He spoke gently but firmly.
Still, if we get any chance at all to save them, even just one, we have to take it.
Lynn sighed quietly, frustration edging into her voice.
Solo, we're already neck deep in a borderline suicide mission. Is rescuing one person really worth the extra risk?
I feel for them. I really do. But
She trailed off, uncomfortable with her own reasoning. Sid's gaze softened, becoming distant, yet deeply earnest.
Every life holds unique potential within the Force. If my family's legacy proves anything, it's that one individual, even a slave boy from Tatooine, can influence the destiny of an entire galaxy.
He looked directly into Lynn's eyes.
We have to hold on to hope and share it wherever and whenever the Force gives us the chance.
Lynn held his gaze, her guarded expression gradually relaxing as she acknowledged his words without further argument. Thus, without saying another word, they continued farther down the conduit corridor until they reached a sudden dead end marked by a missing ventilation grate and overlooking a wide, bustling concourse below. As they looked down, they saw that the concourse beneath them, an area designed to be a sterile, utilitarian thoroughfare, had been transformed into a makeshift base bazaar and recreational hub. It resembled a vibrant indoor plaza, more than the former Imperial energy plant it had long ago served as. Lynn gazed in amused astonishment at the assortment of services, kiosks, and lounges that had apparently been set up by the Quasars. Despite the main lighting fixtures having long succumbed to decay and neglect, the area was brightly illuminated by a patchwork of hastily installed electronics. Neon lights from improvised technology cast colorful glows across the rusted walls and impromptu edifices, which were still scarred by graffiti from the facility's abandonment. Much of the massive foyer still donned the attached and decayed original Imperial equipment, adding a retro flair to the thrifty passageway.
Great. From one seedy gangster nightclub to another. We really have a knack for finding all this planet's hottest spots, huh?
Lynn spoke with synthetic enthusiasm while looking around at the multitudes of armed soldiers lurking among the casually dressed civilians who filled the long, tubular auditorium.
I mean, I figured this complex would be somewhat occupied, but come on, this is just ridiculous.
A hopeless spike entered her whisper.
They've turned it into a whole damn commune. This place is packed, well beyond fire code capacity.
She impudently turned her gaze away from the ruckus below and aimed her sights at Sid, a sincere stringency in her eyes.
if this were New Republic territory, the Quasars would go bankrupt from all the citations their local council would fine them.
She ranted in a fit of doomed frustration. It was evident that whatever the Quasars were doing at this place had little to do with the power plant itself. Yet the operation they were running was still large enough to require a facility as expansive as the plant. Sid's eyes also studied the scene below, but not with the same irritated awe as Lynn. Instead, he gazed upon it with fated suspicion.
The accommodations of this facility are far too extravagant for a simple Quasar black site. When it comes to their illegal activities, they never concentrate this much manpower in one place, especially outside the boundaries of their own turf. The Quasars may be dirty, but they are smart. They always componentize their criminal operations.
Lynn raised an intrigued eyebrow as she turned to look at him, knowing by his tone of voice alone that he suspected much more than he was saying.
Now that you mention it, why would the Quasars risk having the Force links sent here, out of all places?
She paused to think it over carefully, bringing the corner of her lip against her front teeth as her mind crunched through possible explanations.
I mean, like you said, the Quasars control this entire sector of space. They could have those things delivered to any of their space stations or moons.
She turned to look back at the concourse below.
Seriously, why take such an unnecessary risk? What makes this place so special? Is it the core plant itself? I mean, it did look like somebody was trying to fix that sub-reactor we saw.
Sid found Lynn's question to be justifiably logical. So logical, in fact, that her suspicions about the Quasars and the Syndicate's choice to run the Force Link facility on Nexoria matched the same concerns Kai had voiced earlier. Yet, try as he might, every answer Sid came up with in his head was illogical, especially based on everything he knew and had seen about the situation thus far.
It did seem as though some minor effort has been made towards a reactivation of certain core elements of the plant. However, it takes an absolute minimum of 280,000 personnel just to manage a facility like this, and that's only if you're maintaining the systems at the lowest power level possible.
Sid spoke to Lin, though his tone made it sound more like he was thinking aloud.
Yet,
He stopped for a moment, as if he could not believe what he was about to say.
I sense no more than 25,000 organic life forms present in the area. So, I don't see how they would even dream of getting this place up and running. It would take the resources of a galactic empire to get it working again, if you wanted to harness any energy from it.
Sid assessed. He tried to come up with even the most remote plausible reason for why the Quasars were here, but no reason he could think of made any trace of sense. But according to his new Jedi teachings, every effect had a cause, and there was no such thing as senseless actions. If something appeared to not make sense on the surface, then it just meant that one did not possess the information necessary to see the full picture. The Quasars, and especially the Syndicate, were organizations that achieved their powerful status by being cunningly strategic, which meant they had a damn good reason for choosing this location.
So they cannot be here for the plan itself. It would be impossible to operate, even with all these foreign droids they have running around.
His voice trailed off as he observed their surroundings carefully, scouring the area for any clue as to what was really happening. Lin shot Sid an expectant look, waiting for an answer. In her mind, Jedi were supposed to compensate for their dorky behavior by being all-knowing and wise. Yet the sight of a puzzled Jedi, with no answers or philosophical quips for what he was seeing, troubled her more than she would have expected.
Well, looks like the head sleuths at NRIM gave us some woefully inadequate intelligence.
Lin abandoned the hope that Sid would use his force powers to magically solve the mystery on the spot. She just sighed and said,
I guess it's kinda comforting to know that some things will never change.
Sid leaned his head back and allowed the tension in his face to relax.
Well, whatever the case may be, our mission hasn't changed.
He looked down at a stack of large crates directly beneath them. Then he turned and looked her in the eyes, emphasizing his resolve.
Once we plant the explosives, we'll find whatever high-ranking officer or emissary we can, take them alive, and get our answers from them, from the comfort of our ship.
He finished with optimistic confidence.
Wow, Solo, sounds like a solid plan. What could possibly go wrong?
Lin replied sarcastically, mocking his rigid enthusiasm. At the same time, she searched the concourse for another secure route that might grant them discreet passage. But she saw no way forward that offered even the slightest chance of remaining undetected.
Just how in the hell are we supposed to sneak past all these brutes?
She turned toward Solo, only to discover that he was no longer beside her. Looking down, she saw that he had already jumped from the ventilation opening and landed unnoticed behind a stack of large crates.
Solo, what the hell are you doing?
She whispered to herself. He motioned for her to join him. Lin nervously scanned the concourse to make sure no one was watching. There was so much activity below that it seemed unlikely anyone would notice her descent. With a heavy sigh, she jumped down beside Solo. Before her feet had even touched the ground, Lin snapped her head toward Sid, her face twisted with irritated agitation.
Have you gone crazy? That cable tunnel was our best chance of getting around this place. We could have doubled back and found another route. Now what the hell are we supposed to do?
She demanded to know in an angry whisper. Solo cautiously peered around the corner of the stacked cargo crates, concealing them from view.
Well, young Padawan, consider this your first Jedi lesson.
He replied dryly, wearing a sardonic smirk. But the usually sarcastic Lin was in no mood for jokes, as evidenced by the scowl she silently fired at him. Sid didn't need Force sensitivity to understand the reason behind her uncharacteristically serious attitude. He knew she was deeply concerned about the situation in which he had placed them in. But it was more than that. Lin used humor as a source of strength against fear, which was why she could usually crack witty remarks, even under fire. The absence of that behavior suggested that something else about his decision had disturbed her. Then he saw it. She felt betrayed by the trust she had placed in him. The disappointment visible on her face made that clear. Lin, the hard-boiled New Republic agent, did not allow herself to trust others easily. That could only mean one thing. She actually cared about him to some degree. The realization brought a touched smile to Sid's face. It did nothing to soften the intensity of Lin's scowl, but he knew her attitude would change once he explained his plan. He quickly cleared his throat.
At the Jedi Academy, they teach us to use our opponent's arrogance against them.
Lin's eyebrows loosened as her scowl shifted into a skeptical stare. Sid nodded toward the crowded concourse behind them and stole another glance around the edge of the crate.
We use the crowd as our cover.
Lin responded with another unimpressed shake of her head. Understanding her instinctive cynicism, Sid raised one corner of his mouth in an empathetic smirk.
Just take another look.
He gestured toward the crowded atrium. Lin released a quiet growl and shook her head in a deliberate display of skepticism. Nevertheless, she entertained his request and peered around the crate. Lin's eyes widened with coy surprise as she re-examined the scene surrounding them. Once again, Sid's words had unlocked a new perspective, allowing her to view the situation in an entirely different light.
You see, the environment is too relaxed.
Sid's smirk rose as he watched Lin's observant mind study the crowd.
Their overconfidence and their reliance on fear to maintain control means they would never expect two outsiders who infiltrated the facility to simply walk around in plain sight.
Because not only would it be stupid, but suicidal.
Lin finished his thought, cutting him off as she peered around the corner, a note of excited eureka entering her voice.
Yes.
Sid confirmed.
The Quasar cartel is infamous for the way it brutalizes traitors and informants. Though this is the closest sovereign region between Republic and Imperial space, the Elwyn Elders have kept it relevant as the galactic hub for smuggling by using ruthless groups like the Quasar to make it too dangerous to infiltrate their operations.
Tell me about it.
Lin sighed.
I've read some of the reports on captured agents. Morbid stuff.
Taking her eyes away from the crowd, she turned toward Sid.
Being in this line of work, I've seen my fair share of violence, but some of the stuff in those files made me puke.
Lin's face became oddly somber as she lowered her eyes away from Sid's and elaborated further.
They torture them for days, and once they've had their fun, they send hitmen after their families just to set an example. At least in New Republic territory, we can hide them. Unlike the Syndicate, these guys don't have unlimited reach. But still, they can be just as merciless.
Sid could naturally sense Lin's gauntlet of emotions as a wave of bad memories about the details of the Quasar's brutal deeds flooded her mind. Outside of this mission, he had only worked with her a few times before, so he knew her purely on a professional basis. She had a reputation as a lethal and daring agent for the New Republic, willing to stare danger in the face and smile. Yet seeing how beneath all of that, she was still a complex and caring person was strangely reassuring to him. He placed his hand on her shoulder in an effort to comfort her. Slowly, she looked up at him as her terrible recollections dissolved.
We've come this far.
Sid began to reassure her.
Now we are at the final stretch. There's nobody else in the galaxy I would prefer to have watching my back in this situation. And no matter what happens beyond this point, I will have your back as well.
Lin shot Solo a small smirk and playfully brushed his hand away.
Whatever, Solo. I bet you say that to all the pretty secret agents you get into shootouts with.
Sid returned her smirk with one of his own.
Well, if I'm being honest, you were my first.
He spoke with a levity she had not seen from him before. It always impressed Lin when Sid dropped the whole proper Jedi demeanor act and showed his humanity.
Yeah, well, listen, lightsaber boy. If we're going to finish this thing, there's one big bantha in the room we need to address first.
A curious look crossed Sid's face as Lin grabbed him by the shirt and pulled him toward the corner, forcing him to peer out at the cartel soldiers as she pointed toward them.
Compared to everyone else in this place, you're a little overdressed.
She released him before turning her finger toward his robes.
These threads are too fancy. You'll stand out like a sore thumb.
Sid glanced down at himself, looking almost disappointed.
Yes, I think you're right.
He admitted it reluctantly.
I suppose they worked well enough in Zargul's club, but in a working-class environment like this, I'd draw unnecessary attention.
Don't you have some trick where you can, I don't know, turn invisible or something?
She examined his robes and tunic.
Force cloaking is a legendary skill requiring a nearly mythological level of Jedi mastery, one not achieved since the Old Republic. Not even my uncle, Master Luke Skywalker, could have managed it.
He explained.
So that's a no-go.
She rolled her eyes.
Okay, new plan. I'm going to use my irresistible charm to lure one of these Quasar troglodytes over here. When I do, you knock him over the head, and we steal his clothes.
She smiled.
Oh, and just to be safe, I'll be the one to snap his neck so he doesn't wake up.
Sid's eyes calmly widened.
Your confidence is inspiring.
He replied with tempered anxiousness.
But the plan seems a little excessive. I am sure we could find a jacket lying around and...
Lin cut him off with a performatively passionate kiss. As she slowly pulled away, she opened her eyes to find Sid staring back at her, clearly baffled, but not entirely displeased. She giggled at the faint blush coloring his cheeks.
Don't worry. I'm a fast worker.
She stepped backward with a seductive look in her eyes before disappearing around the corner.
They sure as hell don't warn you about girls like her at the academy.
Sid murmured to himself as a surprised yet charmed smirk reactively formed at the corner of his mouth. Before he could process what had happened, a sudden feeling of what seemed like darkness overtook him as a mysterious voice called out.
Jedi.
Confused, Solo looked around, but no one was speaking to him.
Your presence here has long been foreseen. The Force has brought you here, to us, so that you may fulfill your role in the final fate.
Sid quickly realized the voice was coming through the Force, but he was most concerned with who was speaking to him. The voice seemed to carry the same dark energy he had heard the Sith were once able to possess. But when the last Sith Lord, Palpatine, died, so too did the ability to truly harness the dark side. Could the Sith have somehow returned? He wondered. After all, throughout history, the Jedi had survived many purges intended to bring about their extinction. It was only logical that the same might be true of the Sith.
I don't know who you are. However, if these abominable Force weapons are your doing, then I will stop you and your accomplices. You are empowering criminals and others who seek power through the suffering of innocent people.
He declared it aloud, having no idea how to communicate telepathically with the unseen presence.
If the Force brought me to you, then there is no doubt in my mind that it intends for me to stop you from corrupting it any further.
While aboard the Outer Stellar, Sid had sensed an ominous anomaly within the Force, something utterly foreign to him and completely unrecognizable as either light or dark. Although the sensation had been brief, almost instantaneous, it had also felt purposeful, as though it were a signal sent specifically to taunt him, the way a predator might toy with its prey.
The events in which you meddle are far beyond your power to stop.
The mysterious voice continued.
They were set in motion long before you existed. You are but a pawn in a grand design you cannot even begin to fathom. The Jedi are the ultimate heretics of the Force. Your blasphemous principles have protected the cycle of suffering for long enough. The dark side was a response to impurity, intended to cure the universe. Yet the Jedi, in their impious hubris, sought to prevent the great cleansing when they destroyed the Sith.
The stranger's words deeply disturbed Sid Solo. Whoever was speaking appeared to revere the dark side with the same religious devotion once held by the Sith. Yet there was something fundamentally inorganic about the energy carrying the voice through the Force. It felt phantasmal, insidious, and invasive, not merely to Sid's mind, but to existence itself, like sensing a spiritual virus inside the body of reality. It was then that Sid began to strongly suspect that this mysterious being was somehow responsible for the development of the Force-Link technology being distributed by the Syndicate. However, he knew he had to discover who or what this mysterious being was and stop it. Whatever it was planning was far more nefarious than some criminal ambition for a regional power grab. This meant that the stakes had now significantly heightened. Regardless of the risk, the die had been cast, and Sid knew he had to immediately head toward the meeting between the Syndicate and the Quasars. He would have to rely solely upon the Force to guide him where he needed to be.
Well, it would appear as though our very different philosophies seem to be on a collision course.
Sid spoke aloud to the entity.
But I do agree with you on one thing. The Force has brought me here to confront you. However, unlike you, I will not pretend to know why. I only know that I trust in the Force and believe in its will, whatever the outcome may be.
Sid pulled the hood of his cloak over his head.
But whatever fate awaits me, I will do everything in my power to stop you and whatever you have planned, one way or another.
His face was once again concealed by shadows.
Come then, Jedi.
The phantasmal voice challenged him.
Come to us, answer the call of your fate, and take your place at the beginning of the end of suffering, and the end of your apostate Jedi Order.
The entity's choice of words when describing the Jedi eerily echoed those of Sid's deceased brother, Jacen Solo, after he adopted the identity of Grand Crusader Cadiz. Jacen had often spoken of the Jedi in similarly sacrilegious terms, yet it could not be his brother. Not only was Jacen dead, but even after turning against the New Republic and the Jedi, he maintained a radical zealotry toward the light side. He never would have spoken so reverently of the dark side as this disembodied voice had.
I can sense the physical presence from which you speak. He's here on this base, isn't he? Or should I say, aren't you?
Sid declared it to the mysterious entity.
You see what we allow you to see, Jedi. Find us, so that we may show you the true will of the Force.
The next time we speak, it will be face to face.
Solo took one final look in the direction Lynn had gone. He regretted leaving her without an explanation, and he knew she would be disappointed, more than likely furious, when she realized what he had done. But he knew she was no damsel in distress. Despite her light-hearted approach to danger, she was a consummate professional. She would complete the mission, no matter what obstacles she faced. Confident in Lynn's ability to destroy the Force links on site, Sid disappeared into the darkness at the opposite end of the large shipping container. A few moments after Sid had left, Phi Lin approached the group of stacked crates with a Quasar soldier. They had their arms wrapped around each other and were giggling suggestively. Lynn turned to face him, holding him beneath her seductive stare as she guided him backward behind the crates. The plainclothes soldier grinned with barely contained excitement, running his hands eagerly along her waist.
All right, big boy.
Lynn purred as she inconspicuously steered the lecherous soldier toward the threshold of the shadows. She made certain his back was turned toward the darkness, while keeping his eyes fixed firmly upon her.
Are you ready for your surprise?
Barely able to contain himself, the soldier responded with a series of eager noises and nodded wildly.
Okay.
Lynn winked at him before glancing toward the shadows behind his back.
Here it comes.
The soldier began to salivate as he waited for her to reveal the promised surprise. Lynn continued staring into the darkness, her expression gradually shifting to confusion, while she kept one eye trained on the soldier. Maintaining her false smile, she cleared her throat and repeated herself more loudly.
I said.
She enunciated each word slowly and clearly.
Here it comes.
Still nothing. Unable to wait any longer, the soldier tried to pull her into a big, sloppy kiss. But Lynn shoved him away in aggravated frustration. She stepped closer to the shadows, while the bewildered soldier watched her with hungry eyes, apparently mistaking her irritation for some elaborate form of foreplay. Lynn may not have been Force-sensitive, but even she could tell that Sid Solo was no longer there. Deeply perplexed, her brow furrowed. Her eyes suddenly widened as a pair of large, greasy hands grabbed her backside. Enraged, Lynn spun around to face the grinning soldier and, with the speed of a striking viper, drove her knuckles into his throat with precise force. The soldier dropped to his knees, gagging and struggling for breath. Lynn walked toward the edge of the crates with an angry yet puzzled expression, scanning the hall for any trace of Sid.
Sydney, where the hell are you?
She murmured, as the soldier continued choking behind her. Lynn knew Sid would never abandon her without good reason. His disappearance most likely had something to do with his Force senses. Whatever it was, it must have been dire.
I've got such a bad feeling about this.
Lynn sighed. She turned back toward the soldier, who remained on his knees, struggling to catch his breath. Drawing her blaster, she approached him and pistol-whipped him across the head with a single sweeping strike, knocking him unconscious. And with that, Lynn continued the mission without Sid's assistance.
Oh, stars have mercy. I think this is where the story ends. At least for now. Send help if you can. Please and thank you. We'll be back in Volume 3, The Yardell Conspiracy.